And I knew that America would never invest the necessary funds or energies in rehabilitation of its poor so long as adventures like Vietnam continue to draw men and skills and money like some demonic destructive suction tube. You may not know it, my friends, but it is estimated that we spend $500,000 to kill each enemy soldier, while we spend only $53 for each person classified as poor. And much of that $53 goes for salaries to people who are not poor.
Good morning and welcome to the National Newspaper Publishers Association's Let It Be Known. And it is the Martin Luther King Day holiday. And those were obviously the words of the famous civil rights leader to start off our program. But, you know, I saw yesterday, I should say, Dr. Chavis, who we expect to join us later in this show this morning. Dr. Chavis did an interview on his PBS television show, The Chavis Chronicles, which aired yesterday and will air throughout this week, with Andrew Young, the former ambassador, the former mayor of Atlanta, and one of the last living confidants of Martin Luther King Jr. And it's amazing some of the things that Andrew Young had to say. And he pushed back against the idea that things may have gotten worse since Dr. King was assassinated. He says that, look, for those who say, and these is Andrew Young's words, for those who say things are worse, they just don't know. They're misguided and they don't understand the progress that's been made. That progress, of course, continues to be threatened. Now I'm not quoting Andrew Young on this part, but that progress continues to be threatened by the political powers that be. You name it. We're not singling out one particular individual or one particular party. Um, let's face it. It feels like, and of course, many of us wasn't living through the civil rights period, but it seems like we have an idea based on the ideas or ideals of many with these different laws. Listen, Dr. King fought for civil rights. Today we hear so much about civil rights and how the Supreme Court is slowly but surely taking away all of those civil rights that he was at the forefront of. We hear so much people talk about voting rights. We know that 1964, which is what Andrew Young was talking about too in his discussion with Dr. Chavis on the Chavis Chronicles yesterday, and again, it's airing all this week. But he talked about a situation in Lincolnville, Florida, in which he and many others, how the police had brutally beat them, and the Klan had attacked them. And he talked about how the one night the Klan marched through the streets of Lincolnville, and they all had their guns. The Klan had guns, he says, under their sheets. And as they marched through, he said, all these black folks who have been beaten, who have been cursed, who have been otherwise manhandled by the police and by the Klan previously, they stood in a line, essentially, as the Klan marched through their town of Lincolnville. And he said that they had been beaten and beaten and beaten, but it was their faith and strength that allowed them to stand there and then do something about it. So they didn't just march, they did something about it. He said the following week, Andrew Young said the following week, President Johnson was signing um, the civil rights bill. But again, we talk about the voting. That's another big the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, which no one talks about anymore. It seems it died back in 2020, and yet we see constantly, constantly how folks keep saying that they are, and they don't just keep saying it's proof that we know that they're denied that right. Um, there's this redistricting, there's the gerrymandering there, and there's the flat out suppression and flat out taking away that right. Something that King and Andrew Young and those guys, those brave guys back in the 60s and 50s that they fought and got the Voting Rights Act passed. Of course, the Supreme Court again dismantled it to the point now it's meaningless. Meaningless to the point where down in the South in Alabama and Mississippi, where the Supreme Court says you can't do this, and they say yes, okay, you say we can't do it, U.S. Supreme Court, but we're going to do it. They've ignored rulings so that they can have their voter suppression laws anyway. So while Andrew Young is saying this week that there has been a lot of progress, at the same time, he also said it's been the history to take 2 steps forward or 1 step forward and be knocked back 2 steps. Well, they've been knocked back perhaps uh, 100 steps. But we expect to have Dr. Chavis join us later in the show, but he is expected to join about 8:15 today to talk more. Of course, Dr. Chavis was, like Andrew Young, one of the few remaining in that circle, King Circle there. Dr. Chavis, of course, worked as a teenager for the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, and certainly something that he's proud of and has some fond memories and not so fond memories. Not all those memories are fond. Listen, when they're coming with you with the billy clubs and the dog releasing the dogs on you and the Klan is ever present, these are not the good old days. I'm sure these are not what they think about when they think about the good old days. So we expect to talk to Dr. Chavis again later this morning on Let It Be Known. Also this morning we're going to talk about the House Negro number one. The House Negro number one, Ben Carson. Ben Carson. You know, Carson once referred to, not once, I mean, this is how he refers to slaves, or former slaves, the slave trade, the victims of the slave trade as immigrants. But we'll bring his latest disgusting, self-hating remarks he made in his blackface that he wears constantly. We're also going to talk about something we saw. Sonny Hostin. I met Sonny Hostin some time ago. Very cool woman. She's on The View, and she made what I thought was a point about democracy, American democracy, saving democracy, that I think Joe Biden and Chuck Schumer and all the Democrats need to hear. And it's something I had thought about before, and not to try to take credit from her, but but it's spot on to what I had really in my mind when I hear them talk about saving democracy. What comes to my mind? Sonny Hostin really slammed it out the park, I believe, anyway, um, with her comments. Um, and also, we talk about King, right? A black woman in Utah. She was hired to investigate racism at a school district. Well, guess what? She experienced racism herself while doing her job. Yep. And that is the state of, of America. What is it now? 56 years this year after King's assassination. That is the state of America. That is the American nightmare, not King's dream. But first, another day of extreme weather is in store across the continental United States with warnings of wind chill, snow, and freezing conditions in place for so many millions. Y'all better bundle up. Bundle up. I know Power 96 got the gumbo going. I don't know what he got to drink with the gumbo, but you got to have something warm over there, Power 96. The National Weather Service said temperatures could reach minus 30 degrees with wind chills in the plain region and minus 50 in Montana and the Dakotas. See, that's why black folks don't live there. Black folks don't go to Montana and the Dakotas. A series of dangerous winter storms impacted tens of millions of people across the United States over the weekend, from the West Coast to the Great Lakes, and communities were pelted with a wintry mix, and thousands of flight delays were reported nationwide. And Power 96 says he has some gumbo and bourbon. If you change that bourbon to scotch, you just might get a visit from me, Power 96. That bourbon is tough, man. I mean, wow. Yeah. People say, well, you drink scotch. It's a whole different ball game, that bourbon. It's a whole different ball game. That bourbon, truly, the moment you take a swig of bourbon, hair immediately starts growing on your chest. There's no question about it. So, but speaking of the weather, that Buffalo Bills Pittsburgh Steelers game Saturday was postponed to today. And I wonder if you've seen the pictures, the video of the stadium. It looked like some frozen ocean in the Arctic, in the Antarctic, or however you say it. I mean, it looked unbelievable. How I want to know. I want to see today at 4:30 is when the game is scheduled to start. Um, how are they going to get that field? No way to get that field in shape. No way. I mean, look at that. I mean, there was some video that the Bills released too. Though it was like a wave of water, like a tsunami, was going through the stadium. They started hiring people, and Buffalo and the Bills did this in previous years too. They started just inviting all in Buffalo, fans and all, to come for $20 an hour to help clean up the snow and ice in the stadium. But if you haven't seen like the video of that, you gotta check it out. I'm sure you can find it on YouTube or somewhere on online. But it was a sight I'd never seen before. There's that with these guys sliding down there. Wow. But the field, it was unbelievable. Unbelievable in Buffalo. Gotta see that game today. Remember, I talked about, look at this guy. He's having a good time. But yeah, I talked about the Kansas City game last week, and how cold that was going to be. But this this is grown folk football right here. They're going to be playing. And speaking of, um, any Cowboy fans out there, Power 96? Cowboys, they, as my grandmother would say, they can't win for losing. I mean, Green Bay just totally rubbed them out. Went up to Dallas and rubbed them out. Austin says, I can barely spell North Dakota or Iowa, much less live in either state with that kind of cold, as I was raised in Cleveland. But Green Bay Packers destroyed the Cowboys in Dallas. Such a promising season. The Cowboys were what, 12-5? And Green Bay came in at 9-8. And Cowboys had the home field advantage. They was like a 7.5 point favorite. Cowboy fans was feeling themselves. Pam said Cowboy fans are on the couch with us now. They were feeling themselves. Then they started fighting in the stands among each other. Got so mad. The Cowboys got their heads handed to them. And Jerry Jones, somebody said they haven't seen Jerry Jones this upset since they integrated schools. Oh my gosh, the internet is unbelievable. The Texans, I know that our folks down in Houston, I saw Jeffrey Boney and Karen Carter Richards and the crew at the game in Texas, and they saw that the Texans roughed up Cleveland. I mean, really bad, really bad. Austin, that's your hometown. The Browns are from your hometown. But yeah, the Texans got their victory, and so they move on. But I keep going back to the Cowboys because it's just insane what has happened there with the Cowboys. Also, who else happened? Detroit won their first game since like Reconstruction, right? Their first playoff game. They haven't won a playoff game in forever. I don't even know. Was it when Barry Sanders was on the team, the Lion King himself? So Detroit won their game against the Rams. So good for Detroit. They get to move on. Wow. So let's Bill Belichick is now the Cowboys' new head coach. You better believe it. Oh, okay. Aunt Pam said, remember, I said it first. All right. We will give you the credit. Okay. So former U.S. Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, Dr. Ben Carson. I mean, this guy, I have so much to say about Ben Carson. And, it's just, let's just take a look. I'm disgusted with Ben Carson. Let's take a look at what he had to say.
Interestingly enough, you look back to the beginnings of this country and our founders, a lot of people are trying to denigrate them now, saying that they were horrible people, maybe because some of them had slaves, and that America is a horrible place because we had slavery. People who say stuff like that obviously don't have a good grasp on world history, because every society has had to deal with slavery. And there are more slaves in the world today than there have ever been at any point in time. You look at human trafficking and sexual slavery. And we ought to be concerned about what's going on now, not what happened 200 years ago. And if there's anything unique about the United States, if there's anything unique about the United States and slavery, it's that we had so many people who were vehemently opposed to it that we fought a bloody civil war to get rid of the evil institution. And that's what we should teach our children. Our history is nothing to be ashamed of. There's good, there's bad, and there's ugly, as there is in every society inhabited by human beings, which is why we need a savior.
And that savior for Ben Carson is Master Donald Trump.
Oh boy. I think Top Bound 3000 says I think he went under the knife with a different type of brain surgery. My. Ben Carson, Ben Carson, Ben Carson. It's just how much how much how much shucking and jiving, how much butter biscuits can you eat? I mean, my. This guy he's the one who infamously and ignorantly referred to slaves as immigrants. And now he's saying it should not be a source of shame for America. Everybody has something to be ashamed of. They've done something in their life in which they're not that proud of, at least. Let's put it that way. Ben Carson, how much like that young man said, his master Trump. The things that these guys will say and do. Need I remind Ben Carson that somebody else who looked just like him, who sounded just like him, who did everything in his everything except for, at least to my knowledge, except for go to bed with Trump, literally, and maybe who knows, maybe who knows. Anyway, a guy that caught COVID because of Trump, a guy that died because of Trump, and Trump never mentioned his name. Hasn't at least publicly mentioned this guy's name in the 4 years now that he's been dead. Y'all know who I'm talking about. Herman Cain. And and to just go so deep. It's one thing, and I talk about it all the time because I'm not affiliated politically with anybody, will never be. But it's one thing to say, okay, I'm a Democrat or I'm a Republican, I'm a conservative, I'm a liberal. That's fine, that's your choice. But you cannot tell me you're not in some sort of cult if you can't think for yourself. If you can't distinguish the fact that there was all this stuff. And here we are. I mean, he made these comments a couple of days ago. And here we are, Pete talking about Martin Luther King, right? And Andrew Young and Ralph Abernathy and those folks, right? Who was battered and beaten, and in King's case, of course, assassinated because of racist ideologies, those with racist ideologies, these so-called conservatives. I mean, come on. Byron Donalds. How does it get that far? How does it get that far? Is the money that good? Because Carson is a brain surgeon who obviously needs brain surgery, but he's a brain surgeon, meaning he's very well off. So why does he have to pick cotton for Trump? Why does he feel the need to be out in the fields for Trump? I don't get it. I don't get it. Herman Cain was very wealthy. He was a multimillionaire. But to, to, to everybody else, especially black people, well, to black people, you guys, well, you got to raise yourself up by the bootstrap. I mean, come on. Come on. Austin says they are dumb brain surgeons in the world. They are certainly a self-hating idiot of a brain surgeon. It's unbelievable. It's totally unbelievable that these people. I mean, I can get Candace Owens, right? Because her thing is a game. It's a complete game that she's playing to make money. As disgusting as she is, as a pig slop of a woman she is, I get it. I get it. Power 96 says you have to remember in Mississippi and Alabama, the state holiday today is for Robert E. Lee, not Dr. King. I bet Carson and the rest of the sellout Negroes don't say a word. Unbelievable. Let's take a look at this response for our people when someone says slavery was everywhere or that black people held slaves. Let's take a look at this.
United States. They engaged in an act of war against the government. If the Confederates were patriots, they would have followed the direction that the country was going and the leader that was elected to run this country. What they did was they chose to pick up arms and go to war against the United States of America. That is the most treasonous, unpatriotic thing in American history. Then an older white guy chimes in and he says this.
Well, why do y'all always blame America for slavery? Slavery was in Africa. Slavery was in Rome. Slavery existed in a lot of other places outside of America.
Youngster, they fucking with the wrong one. Sir, there is one ingredient in American slavery that made it completely different from any other form of slavery that existed on the planet before it. And that ingredient was based on a pseudoscience saying that the people being subjugated were not even a part of the human race. They were not Homo sapiens. They were subhuman. So the people being enslaved were not even being considered human beings. Slavery in other places never had that element. In Rome and Africa, the people being subjugated were not seen as not being human. It was based solely on might is right. I defeated you. You can't beat me. Go take care of my cattle. But the idea that Africans were not even humans made American slavery totally different. It was more dehumanizing than any other form of slavery that existed on the planet before. This is an American ingenuity. If I own you and you have a kid, I own your kid. And if your kid has a kid, I own that kid. I own your whole bloodline. It is an egregious miscalculation to equate slavery in Africa, slavery in Rome, and what the fuck was going on in America. Then I hear this.
Knock out a lot of those flags around.
Apologize for the language there at the end. But he broke it down, didn't he? He broke it down. It's just so ridiculous. And if he is, I'm like I said, I mentioned about the Candace Owens and doing it for the dollar. If he's doing it for the dollar, it's still, I mean, you go a little bit too far here. Too far. Not a little bit, a whole lot too far. It's just Candace, not Candace Owens. Oh God, the absolute opposite of Candace Owens is Sonny Hostin. The complete polar opposite. As Power 96 said about that last video, no, not one lie detected. Sonny Hostin of The View really pinpointed the problem that Democrats and the Biden campaign are having in their quest to regain black voter support. I mean, she was 1000% spot on. I believe we have the video. Let's take a look.
We must save our democracy is not resonating in the same way that when in 2016, when Joe Biden issued that video, 2020 rather, and he said, I'm running to save the soul of this country. It resonated with me in a way that I never thought it would. And that's how he got my vote, as everybody knows, because I can, switch around candidates that I like or not. And when I listen to We're going to Save Our Democracy, I start thinking, well, unfortunately, you didn't really save the soul of this country because we're more divided now than we ever were. And I start thinking, well, then our democracy is really at risk. So those two things can exist at the same time, right? So stay with me here. What we're seeing by the Republican Party, and I give it to them, we're seeing a long game. We're seeing that they are dismantling or attempting to dismantle institutions. All of a sudden, the most elite colleges and universities in the world, which, by the way, they all went to. Everybody in the Supreme Court went there. Elise Stefanik went there. All the Congress people went there. Ted Cruz went there. Those schools are not good enough anymore because now people that don't look like them were getting in. Affirmative action, no more. Why? So that people that don't look like them don't get in. Women don't have reproductive rights anymore over their own bodies. Why? So they can have power over women. Why is French and Mandarin and Spanish being taken away from our public schools so that we can be a monolingual society and can't compete globally? The Republicans are intentionally dumbing down our electorate, erasing history so that past can become prologue and so they can remain in power. And it's grievance politics at its best. And it's because people see what Sarah was saying. I can't pay my electric bill. My gas bill's high. I need my food. And why is that? Why is my station in life like this? It's because that black guy got into Harvard and became president. Or it's because that immigrant is over there doing better than driving a nicer car than I'm driving. It's grievance politics, but culture wars specific. And I wish people could see it in that way because this is not by accident. I think this messaging of we must.
It is incredible how she nailed that. Just totally nailed it. Listen, they need to take note. They really need to take note because when he ran, Biden, on that saving the soul of America, it did resonate with a lot of folks because of what had happened the previous 4 years or 3.5 years at that point. But she also hit on the fact that that the Republicans played a long game, but even in a short game, their messaging is awful. Their lack of being able to take control of the message. Power 96 noticed again. Biden is speaking with Sharpton today. Sharpton, he says, "Come on now, the White House needs to do better," and that's another problem. They think, oh, let's just go to Sharpton because he's a civil rights leader. Sharpton is an Al Sharpton leader. He's no more a civil rights leader than I am, and I'm not a civil rights leader. Sharpton has done something incredible, absolutely incredible when you think about it. He was not at all part of that civil rights movement. He doesn't even claim to be. And some people call it the biggest grift ever. But whatever you call it, what makes it incredible is that he has gotten presidents, corporations, and news networks, NBC News in particular, to a point under his thumb, to a point where whatever he says when he says. He can. This is a guy who has the bat phone in the White House without question. He can pick up the phone and call directly to Kamala Harris, the vice president, call directly to President Biden. The only president he wasn't able to do that was Trump. Let's be real. This and here's the thing. What I'm trying to say is, what has he delivered? He shows up at crisis and then winds up giving the funeral talk and gets paid for his services. Oh boy, I know this is very unpopular. Nonetheless, if Democrats are serious, they need to take a note. Going on Al Sharpton ain't it. You're right, Power 96. I mean, what's Sharpton's leverage here? Sharpton's not gonna get in bed with Trump, is he? But the bottom line really is that they talk about saving democracy as if black folks are going to jump and say, yeah, we need to go help them save democracy. Black folks watched, like everybody else, January 6th and saw who and what they were doing at the Capitol and saw that this fight is y'all fight. Black folks are thinking, okay, yeah, the Confederacy ain't it, of course. The Confederacy was, disgustingly inhumane, to say the least. You can think of a lot of ways to put it, but to say the least. But what has democracy brought over the past, 50 years? We've seen time after, as Sonny Hostin mentioned about the long game with the Republicans. Well, back in the 70s, early 70s is when they started their attack against Roe v. Wade. Back in the 70s is when affirmative action passed. But back in the 70s is when they began their assault on affirmative action. And all these years later, as Sonny Hostin points out, the long game, they didn't give up. And so this idea of we can't get the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act passed because of a Joe Manchin or because of Kirsten Sinema or because of the Republicans or whatever, this idea that they can't have or save affirmative action or Roe v. Wade or get the John Lewis Voting Rights Act passed, it's ridiculous. It's because of lack of effort and lack of caring. I mean, there's a bit of, yeah, I care about that, but that's not paramount at all. That's not see, all these are black issues for the most part. And black people, they voted for Biden in droves in 2020. Yes, they did. But at the same time, and I said it then, go back and roll the tape. I said it then, it's the last time they're going to do it. Unless they see some significant changes, unless they see a significant difference in what their bottom line is. See, they keep saying, and we say it too on this show because it's true, that this administration, you always got to say it, the Biden-Harris administration has done more for the cause of the African American than any other administration ever. Right? Period. And we had a black president. But many black folks Many black folks, they're feeling like, okay, this is the only time you pay attention is when it's time to get a vote. This is and they're not seeing any tangible. I mean, yes, the black unemployment rate is down, historic lows, but it's still a lot of black people unemployed. And student loan debt has been crucial. Biden ran on it. And yes, despite the opposition, he's been able to accomplish a lot with that. He just the other day did based on the SAVE Act or the SAVE Plan or whatever you call it, was able to erase some more student debt. He's given a lot of money to HBCUs, more so than anybody else. But once again, the main things, these are things that are great, they're good. They're making little pockets of difference. Remember they had the child tax credit and they talked about how it brought so many children out of poverty. Well, where did it go? Why don't we still have it? Why don't we still have it? This is what they see, and this is what Sonny Hostin meant. It's she's spot on. And the thing about it is that this is not an attack at all on the Biden-Harris administration. It's just simple. Wake up. Listen to what black folks are saying. This is what the black folks are saying. Listen to us. They're not saying that they're going to go and vote for Trump, because they're not. What they're saying is, listen to us or don't expect our support. Black people can't get behind this saving democracy. They really can't, because to them it hasn't worked for them for at least since King. We're talking about King today. It hasn't worked for them since King. King was able to. He and Andrew Young and those guys were able to make democracy work for black folks. They got important legislation passed. Andrew Young said that they were able to, you know why he got that legislation passed? Because down in Atlanta, where they had their base, they were smart enough. They were smart enough to really come together. We always talk about what black people can do if they come together. Well, they did it. And because they had the President Johnson calling them down in Atlanta saying, and Andrew Young told the story. I love this part of the story. And when I spoke to him, this is what he told me. And I know he's probably told Dr. Chavis a million times this story. Dr. Chavis probably was around for the story. He probably knew about it. But they called Johnson, the president, called down to Andrew Young and those folks in Atlanta and said, we want to put somebody up for Supreme Court. Who's good? Give us somebody for the Supreme Court. And that's how they got those the Voting Rights and Civil Rights Act passed, because they were able to get the right folks on the Supreme Court. The president used them. Dr. Chavis is with us all the way from Raleigh, North Carolina, Raleigh-Durham, and his camera's going in and out. I don't know whose camera is worse this morning, Doc's or mine's. Which one? We lost him. Well, as we try to get Doc back, quickly, a black woman who was hired by a northern Utah school district to investigate racial harassment complaints the year after a 10-year-old black student died by suicide says that she too experienced discrimination from district officials. Jocelyn Thomas, a former coordinator in the Davis School District's Equal Opportunity Office, alleges in a federal lawsuit that district staff treated her as, quote, if she were stupid, and accused her of having a substandard work ethic and denied her training and mentorship opportunities that were offered to her white colleagues. They said from the beginning of her employment, Dr. Thomas was treated differently than her lighter-skinned and non-black co-workers and was subject to a hostile work environment. So they treated the person that they supposedly brought in because of race problems. It was racism against her. Unreal. Well, as we await Dr. Chavis, if Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. were alive today, he'd be 95 years old. His powerful words from 60 years ago would echo with profound relevance in current realities. In the 1960s, of course, the civil rights activists, including Dr. King, faced so much opposition. They were labeled unpatriotic. Sadly, this resonates today as movements like the Black Lives Matter and educators exploring Black history encounter similar attacks reflective of the challenges endured during the civil rights era. Racism, war, poverty, and violence scarred both domestic and international landscapes, then mirroring the struggles we see today. The quest for that quote unquote beloved community that Dr. King fervently spoke of, free from war, racism, and poverty, remains an inspiration for social justice movements who carry King's legacy. Dr. King's activism in 1963, of course, redefined American democracy, turning debates on racial integration, civil disobedience, and voting rights into a global referendum on freedom. Present day activists, including Black Lives Matter, continue this legacy, advocating for the abolition of racially biased systems, voting rights, equal education, and environmental justice. And we know Dr. Chavis was the one who coined the term in the 1980s, environmental racism. So as folks reflect today on MLK Day 2024, the parallels between today's partisan divisions and the challenges that King faced in the 60s are quite striking. And the controversial passage of the 64 Civil Rights Act and the 65 Voting Rights Act still resonates with the struggles today. Assaults against teaching Black history, voter suppression, and backlash against racial and economic justice. Well, this was all things that we plan to talk about with our CEO, Dr. Chavis. He's in North Carolina. Apparently, there are some issues with connecting. And so what we will do, folks, is plan to talk to Dr. Chavis at a later time. And Power 96 says, I am sick and tired of Democrats running to people like Charlemagne during election time. Quinn, Mr. Durrett, says that he's asking, when did democracy ever play in the favor of Black folk? And see, that's my point. That is my point, that many Black folks are saying that same thing. When you hear folks talk, when we interview people, when we go around DC and New York and everywhere else, Philly, wherever, they're just not feeling that message of save democracy. They're not feeling it at all. And yet we reach out to like the DNC and get no response. This is the Black press. I mean, you should have our ear. And Power 96 is just watching to see how many people tweet or make a post about Dr. King today, but they have stood against everything that Dr. King stood for. Yeah, that's going to happen for sure. So I'm sure it's happening as we speak, Power 96. But the messaging is totally off. And this is, there are, okay, so say Biden starts his day on calling into Al Sharpton's show. There should be more profound, more effective places in which he spends his day. Because again, look, he don't have to, but again, he's courting the Black vote. And there is the president and CEO of the National Newspaper Publishers Association and the host of the Chavis Chronicles, as we talked about earlier in the show, Dr. Benjamin F. Chavis Jr. Dr. Chavis, welcome to Let It Be Known.
Thank you. I hope you can hear me. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
And listen, happy Martin Luther King Jr. Day. And we appreciate the letting me know. It continues to put out the news, continues to put out the advocacy. As you know, when I was 14 years old, I was a youth coordinator for the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. So every time that they have this national holidays, I always have personal firsthand memories of Dr. King, of his courage, of his steadfastness in faith and action. And as I said in an article that you wrote, we need Dr. King's vision and courage today more than ever before.
Yeah, and Dr. Chavis, we see that the Voting Rights Act, the Civil Rights Act, those important things. We see poverty. Those things are gone pretty much, right? The Voting Rights Act has been stripped of any power that it contained when King and his constituents when they fought for it and they got it signed. The Civil Rights Act has been stripped. The Supreme Court is threatening to take away so many different liberties. Give us a little insight, Dr. Chavis, on what Dr. King, if he were alive today, what would he say today based on what we see going on?
Well, first, I think he would remind us how we got the Civil Rights Act of 1964, how we got the Voting Rights Act of 1965, and how we got the Fair Housing Act in 1968. It was because we dared to struggle. It's because we dared to stand up. States, a lot of people in 2014 said, well, we tired of marching, we tired of. Listen, most of the people said that never marched. So the thing is, we are the beneficiaries of the prior struggle of our foreparents, of our ancestors. Every generation has to rise to the occasion. If we don't rise to the occasion, then we lose what we was hard fought for. People died, Stacy, went to jail to get the right to vote. Now we got people, even in our community, talking about they don't want to vote. They don't see why they should vote. So we contribute to part of the problem when we have amnesia when it comes to the freedom movement, the freedom struggle. On the other hand, uh, people like Donald Trump, they're giving a green light to white supremacy and to people that want to, take the nation backwards. So, when he says "Make America Great Again," he's really saying "Make America White Again." The browning of America has got some people in fear. And Dr. King would always say that we can't build a movement around fear. We have to build a movement around our aspirations, around those things, and that we fight for freedom not only for ourselves, but we have to fight for freedom for all of God's people.
And Dr. Chavis, you mentioned folks not voting. The a lot we keep hearing, and Sonny Hostin, we played Sonny Hostin's take earlier. A lot of black folks, though, or many black folks, are just they're what they're tired of. Really, is not seeing any tangible results for Black America.
Well,
Um,
Stacey, again, that's a good point, but that's what's been said, that's what's been referred, and that's what's been articulated. But I would venture to say that we need to put some eye drops. We don't see the progress that we made. This is 2024. I can go to almost every community in our nation and show you how what we're living in 2024 is better than it was in 1964 or 1974. But we don't recognize it because we don't have that point of reference. That's why the history is so important. History repeats itself when people don't learn from it, Stacey. And I think that that is not to say no, we have not overcome. Is America still racist? Absolutely. Do we still have to deal with white supremacy? Yes. But also, we still have to deal with our own disillusionment. We have to deal with our own cynicism. We have to deal with our own hopelessness. And I think that there are many factors that contribute to this, not one. But the reason why I so love the black press and what you do and let it be known. Our job is not only to report the news, but to be an advocate and to inspire people to make more news. I tell brothers and sisters all the time, the best way to celebrate Black history is to make some more history. You just can't study it. You got to make some more. And the same thing about the civil rights movement. If you want to continue to have access to voting rights, then we got to fight for it. If you want to battle the Supreme Court taking away affirmative action, we got to fight for it. It's amazing to me how people kind of, sit around, not march around, sit around and complain about the way things are, but not willing to get up and join the movement.
And well, first of all, let me just say again, folks, Andrew Young was making some of these points on Dr. Chavis's The Chavis Chronicles. You might want to tune into your local PBS station this week to see that interview on The Chavis Chronicles. But Dr. Chavis, again, I want to go back to this idea of messaging. The Biden administration keeps saying saving democracy, and as Sonny Hostin put it, what resonated with Black people, including herself, was saving the soul of America. Now it's saving the Democrats' messaging. In other words, Dr. Chavis, I think there's little dispute.
They definitely have to work on messaging. Keep in mind that one of Dr. King's power was it was his oratory, but it was the message in his oratory. I mean, there are a lot of good speakers out here, Stacey, but what the difference that Dr. King made was what he said, not just how he said it. And today, the Democratic Party is failing to say in its messaging why the soul of the nation's at stake, why the soul of Black people is at stake, why the soul of white people is at stake, why the soul of all people is at stake in America. And I think that if the soul of the people of America is at stake, then that means that the soul of the people of the world is at stake. We're the nation's leading economies, have the largest military, the most mighty military, but yet we always wind up on the wrong side of history. And I think sometimes this is not just a Democrat or Republican matter. This is a matter of losing ground in terms of what makes us freedom fighters in the first place. It's just not observing what's wrong, but saying, hey, you know what? I'm going to do something about this. I'm going to have the courage. That's why the article that you published was about Dr. King's courage. And we need more courage. But you're right, the messaging. We need to help the Democrats with their messaging. They're losing ground because their messaging is not effective.
And Dr. King, Miss Charisse is posting on Twitter this question for you. She says, will you speak to the strategy and tactical maneuvering to gain the Civil Rights Voting Act?
Yes, absolutely.
Civil Rights and Voting Act.
Absolutely. Dr. King was very wise. He realized we need to build a massive grassroots movement. Social change is change from the bottom up, never from the top down. And I think that's another part of the messaging problem with the Democrats. It's a messaging that kind of flows down. It doesn't excite and empower people up. And that's what we need. So tactically, we need to go back. One of the things I learned at the Million Man March, that our communities can be organized. Our communities can be mobilized. But we have to have a steadfast, consistent messaging, and then also a steadfast, consistent actions for people to participate. Freedom movement has to be participatory. It's just not one or two leaders saying what needs to be done. No, we need millions of our people to say what needs to be done, and that will make a difference.
And Power 96 is, I'm sorry, Dr. Chavis, Power 96 is asking you, how can we as Black 13 or 14-year-olds be involved in politics or civil rights?
Thank you so much. That's a great question. I was working with Dr. King when I was 14 years old, put my license up, driving when I was 14, so I could be in the movement, so I could have mobility. I think the young people today, the millennials and Generation Z, is the best young group of people we've ever witnessed, but they need to be encouraged. They need to be informed. We can't afford a generation gap in the freedom struggle. We can't afford a cultural gap where our young people have a one cultural affirmation and those who are elders have a no. No, we need one benefit, one intergenerational movement for freedom, justice, and equality. So yes, I have great hope, great faith that young people will rise to the occasion. You know, in 2020, there was the largest youth voter turnout in American history. People not forgetting that. It was the largest, you know, and so that's why all the social media is now is trying to dumb down, movement down, activism down, young people, trying to make them think that the movement is useless. The movement is not useless. I tell people all the time, your vote only counts if you vote.
Just a couple more for you, Doc, before we let you go. One, as you mentioned, and we know your history, 14 years old, working at the SCLC under King. Did you recognize at that time, Doc, when you look back, when you were 14 years old, did you recognize the true meaning of what you were doing and what King was doing at that time?
Oh, yes, sir. Thank you very much. That's one reason why, even while I was in high school, I was a freedom fighter because I not only recognized it, Stacy, I saw it in our hands. I saw the grasp. You know, I tell people all the time, marching is therapeutic. Protesting is therapeutic. You know, standing up, speaking out is therapeutic because the more you do it, the more proficient you become at what you're doing. And right now, we wait to maybe Black History Month to talk about Black History Month, or we wait to Dr. King Day to talk about Dr. King Day, or we wait to Juneteenth to talk about Juneteenth. We have to have 365 days, 24/7, fighting for freedom. 365 days, 24/7, putting out the right message. 365 days, 24/7, making sure that with that messaging, it's a complement of mass movement building, mass organizing, mass mobilizing. And also, I just want to parenthetically say, in 2024, the U.S. Department of Commerce just reported that African Americans in the last 12 months, Stacy, have spent $1.9 trillion. We are the richest form of slaves in the world.
And Doc, that ugly day in 1968, when an assassin's bullet cut King down,
April 4th, 1968.
April 4th, yeah. Where were you, Doc, and what was your initial reaction, and where did you see at that point America headed?
Well, I cried. I know some people say, well, Black men don't cry, but I cried. And I was in Charlotte, North Carolina. In fact, there was a sanitation strike in Charlotte, like in Memphis. The American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees asked me. I also was a young labor organizer for ASME, the same labor union that brought Dr. King to Memphis. And he was going to leave Memphis and come to Charlotte. I was an advanced brother on the SCLC team with Golden Franks and Milton Fitch. You know, but obviously Dr. King didn't make. So it was a painful day. But, you know, I'm glad you asked. I was a chemistry major. I was an organic chemist. But I made a commitment on that day that I was going to finish my chemistry degree, but I'm going into the ministry. I wanted to help keep Dr. King's dream alive. And I'm 76 years old this month. I'm still trying to keep Dr. King's dream alive.
Well, Dr. Chavis, we really appreciate you jumping on this morning. I know it's a particularly very special.
I'm at the Raleigh Dam Airport. I'm just getting off the plane, but I'm glad we were able to get on. And I really want to thank you and Greer and all the NNPA team for keeping Let It Be Known on the air. And we got to make sure that the DNC listens because they could help. I think, Stacey, you could help them with their messaging.
Well, we've certainly reached out to Jamie Harrison a few times now, so we are, as you know, I mean, you're the boss. You know, the door is open for the DNC to talk with us. So we'll keep pressing, Doc.
All right. God bless and thanks to everyone and happy to all Martin Luther King Jr. Day. He said at the end that an injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Peace is not the ending a war. Peace is the presence of justice. And God bless everybody.
Thanks for watching. Let It Be Known. We'll see you tomorrow.